Good afternoon and welcome to today's webinar on software application for real-time predictive scorecard creation. Thank you for taking the time to join us. My name is Mallory and I'm going to go through a few logistical things and then introduce our presenter, Forrest Breyfogle, before we get started. Again, thank you for taking the time to join us. We have a lot of material planned, so the webinar is going to last about 1 hour. We have allowed for time for questions, so please, as we go through, please enter your questions into the GoToWebinar system through the texting option. All participants are muted so that we can get through the activities, but please be sure to text as questions come up. If we do not get to them at that time, we will definitely address your questions at the end. There's also going to be a recording of today's webinar, so if you have anyone else that would like to view it, or if you would like to view it again at a later time, we will be sending an email out to you within 48 hours, so please be on the lookout for that link to the recording. Please know that as a participant in today's webinar, someone with Smarter Solutions will follow up with you. If you do not wish to be contacted, please let us know at the exit survey when you exit the webinar. I will now introduce our presenter, Forrest Breyfogle. Forrest is the CEO and President of Smarter Solutions. He's a professional engineer, ASQ fellow, and is a past advisor for the University of Texas Center for Performance Excellence. In 2004, he received a Crosby Medal for his book, Implementing Six Sigma, Second Edition. He was recently named the 2011 Quality Professional of the Year by Quality Magazine. And he has authored or co-authored 13 books and published over 100 technical articles. His recent series is the Integrated Enterprise Excellence book series. I will now turn it over to Forrest to get started. Thanks again.
Okay, great. Let's jump on in here. First off, I'd like to go in and talk about the learning objectives from this webinar. I think there's some issues a lot of times with our process improvement efforts. A lot of times we don't really focus on the big picture when we're making process improvement efforts, and sometimes the people at the top of the organization don't see the value. And we're going to talk about that briefly. Then I'll be talking about a predictive scorecard system using this software package, which we call EPRS, Enterprise Performance Reporting System. Then I'll describe how the use of this enterprise performing reporting system within this overall IEE system can help actually create projects that help the big picture. Okay, let's think about in what really happens often when we have project selections. We'll get a list of projects that executives or some teams think that are important, and what often really happens, we somewhat push those into the system. You know, those are not necessarily bad projects. However, often the process owner is really not asking for them. So the projects may actually stall out in time, and in reality, they don't really have much priority for getting done. So to me, that really seems to be an issue. So what can we do about that? What I'm suggesting is that we need to have a system where predictive scorecards are really integrated with analytically and innovatively determined strategy so that we can really achieve what I call 3 R's of business. That is, everybody doing the right things and doing them at the right time. And what that happens is we're actually working on process improvement efforts that help the big picture. And how we can accomplish that is through this integrated enterprise excellence system. So we got a question here. Does your organization use red, yellow, green, or stoplight scorecards? So please give us your response, and we can see what percentage of those people out there are responding to the question. Okay, let's give it a few more seconds. Okay, well, it looks like, what do we have here? Well, 71% say they are using red, yellow, green scorecards. and then a 24% are not. Okay, well, what I'm going to be suggesting or leading to is that red, yellow, green scorecards have some fundamental issues and can actually lead to a lot of firefighting, and maybe they don't really accomplish what most people think that they do. If we look at how numbers or metrics are typically reported, we might see a tabular form of reporting. Now, if we look at this sort of form of reporting, it really doesn't look at our enterprise as a process, where basically at the high level it's an integration of all the processes together. What invariably we'll get is stories from this form of presentation. So if we look at that table, we might notice in line number 3 that our costs were going up in 2002. So someone might say, if they're reporting this particular report out, they would say, our costs have gone up in 2002 because we were expecting more annexation. But in reality, they did not occur as quickly as we expected. But in 2003, they dropped. So therefore, we're really on track. Can't you hear somebody giving stories about the tabular form that you've seen in your organization? If you look at the bar charts we have on the lower left-hand corner, this form of reporting often looks at the kind of problems that we're having in this week or today, perhaps. But is that really what we should be focusing our efforts on? Because if we're honest with ourselves, often the problems that we're addressing using this form of reporting doesn't fix the problems on a long-lasting basis. Well, another form, that's the balanced scorecard. You know, and it's got some good aspects to it. We're looking at the customer, financials, putting processes and learning. But the thing is, it's lined to strategies, and the strategies can change over time, which really can affect our metrics. Then we've got the red, yellow, green scorecards at the bottom. And as you said, it looks like about 3/4 of you are familiar with this form of reporting. That's the kind of reporting I'm going to be giving an example of a little bit later here. If we look at typical metrics, the kind we've just been talking about here, often what we do is we'll have metrics that are based upon the fiscal year. Also, they're not related to the improvement system. What else can happen? They make point-to-point comparisons. So we might be comparing last quarter to this quarter and maybe what happened a year ago. But is that the right thing to do? But if we look at our overall organization as a system, what do we really have? We've got process steps that we're going through. They may be documented or it may not be documented, but they're actually there. We also have inputs to our process. So if we look at our organization as having a system of processes, then what we have is y as a function of x. So if we don't like the value for y, we need to either change the x's or the process steps, period. If we just try to manage to the y the way we often have in organizations, you know what that's called? It's called management by hope. And we really don't want to have management by hope. So what I'm suggesting, we really need to have effective metrics that lead to the 3 R's of business. Everybody doing the right things, doing them right at the right time. But in order to accomplish that, we really need to view the enterprise as a system of processes. We also need to acknowledge the effect of variability, because variability is going to occur. And we need to also have this all integrated with long-lasting systematic process improvement. This does not mean that every organization needs to improve, because often we just don't have enough bandwidth for that. What we really want to do is to focus in the areas that's going to most positively impact the big picture. Now this is an actual red, yellow, green scorecard. As you noted, a vast majority of you people that are listening in here actually use and are familiar with this type of reporting. Now, it sounds real attractive in that a manager can look at the last column of numbers and look at the color, because that represents the most recent time period, and then start going in and taking action. If a color is red, let's get somebody working on the issue because we're not meeting our goals. If it's green, let's bring out the champagne. But the problem is, a lot of times what we can have is a situation where we've got common cause variability and we're acting as though it's special cause. We're saying, what happened today? It's red. And that presents an issue. Now, let me dwell upon this a little bit further. A lot of times people have difficulty understanding or appreciating the difference between common and special cause variability. So I'm going to use an illustration. We're going to illustrate the time it takes from commuting from home to work. Now, is it going to take the same amount of time to the second? Well, no. We're going to have some variability. The traffic condition is going to be larger on one day than another day with stoplights and so on. So we typically might take between 25 and 35 minutes. So we might establish a goal of having it so that we want to reduce the amount of time to 27 minutes. So we're going to try to understand whenever it took longer than 28 minutes. We're going to react to it, and we'll try at least to understand it so we don't do that again. But more often than not, that's just common cause variability in this example. And that we can drive ourselves basically crazy. Now, if it took us an hour longer, it's a special cause. But so often what we can see, and I'm going to be demonstrating, that we can be actually switching from red to green and nothing really changed. So let's talk about this situation a little bit further. We're going to look at one of the metrics, finance metric B. Now, if we notice, it's got 33% red and 50% green. Now, is it common or special cause variability? Well, just looking at the colors, we really just don't know. Now, just to reiterate, with this type of presentation of scorecards, of a metric, it's a policy. It drives a certain kind of behavior. That whenever it's red, we need to take action on it. So in the example I was talking about, commuting from home to work, we need to take action because it took us 34 minutes and it didn't achieve our goal, 33 minutes. What can happen is we can really lead to a lot of firefighting, or then we start making up reasons why it took a little bit longer, or observations, and we're reacting to a lot of its common cause variability. And in addition, it does not tell us anything about the future. So let's take this same set of data. What I'm going to do is I'm going to track it using an individual's control chart. Now, some people might say, well, that's just a control chart. Well, this is not a traditional control chart. Traditional control charts are to try to take timely action so that we can take preventive action because it's maybe special cause conditions. But this is a little bit different. This form of charting is what I'm calling 30,000-foot level charts. And as you can see, this is monthly data on the x-axis. So we're not really taking timely intervention. So if we've got differences between raw material lots, even days of the week, or people, those are considered sources of the common cause variability. And I'm not trying to take action on that because I'm considering that to be part of the overall system. So what do we know from looking at this control chart? Well, for one thing, is if the red, yellow, green scorecard indicated that an improvement was made when it changed from red to green. But the control charts doesn't indicate that's the case. Now, what else can we learn from this? Well, I'm suggesting we don't just stop by the calendar year, for example. A lot of times people want to report what happened this year. What I'm suggesting is we go back in time over many years for that matter. And if we're plotting the information this way, then we might see maybe nothing changed in the last 3 weeks, 3 months, or 3 years. It may have different levels of stabilities, we might say. So if something hasn't changed recently, again, 3 weeks, 3 months, or 3 years, what can we say? We could say our process is predictable. Now, isn't that exciting? The other form of reporting doesn't say anything about predictions, stacked bar charts, pie charts, red, yellow, green scorecards, or other form of reporting. So right now, with this methodology, we can say the process is predictable. The next obvious question is, what do you predict? So what we're going to look at now is taking that recent region of stability, and we're going to build a histogram that represents a distribution of what we believe we'll see in the future. Because we're going to take this recent region of stability data and consider it to be a random sample of the future. Now, this is presuming that we don't have any process improvement efforts, and also we don't have something major that changed the overall process that caused the shift. Now, if we turn that histogram on its side and we put the 2.2 value, which is the specification or the goal that we're trying to achieve, such that whenever it is below 2.2, we consider it to be a red trigger. So the area under the curve, the left of 2.2, represents percentage of time that we believe that we're going to have a red type condition, or below 2.2, in the future. Now, it's hard to determine what that area in that curve is from that density function, so I prefer to have a normal probability plot, or a probability plot in general. I can handle distributions that are not normally distributed. This is really a better approach. And that area, if I come up from the x-axis of 2.2 and over, I get a value of 32.6, represents the area of the curve. So we conclude about 32.6% of the time is going to be below 2.2. So how do we present this information? Well, first off, we want to see if our process is stable. And if it's not, we might have a recent region of stability. It could be 3 weeks, 3 months, or 3 years. The whole period might not be stable, so we might have to stage it. We then create the probability plot, which really is consistent with Deming's point of view, where variability needs to be considered in the overall statement. The way I like to present it in general is we then would say we got a predictable process with approximately 32.6% nonconformance. Now, how does this go in and fit with this overall software? Well, what I'm suggesting is we want to take this form of metric reporting and actually put it together as part of the business system. So what we've really been focusing on is the measurements that are described in step number 2. I mentioned 30,000 foot level reporting represents operational metrics, and satellite level represents financial metrics. We got profit margins and metrics such as those. So that's the difference between satellite and 30,000 foot level metrics. Now, what I would like to do now is to describe how we could apply these techniques within an overall hospital. So this is the software that can help us do that. what I like to do first is look at how we're going to picture the process itself. Because step 2 of that overall system describes what I call the value chain. Okay, so we're going to link our metrics that we just described to the overall value chain. Now, if we look at what a hospital does, those could be represented by the 5 boxes in the top. Now, the only difference between the gray color and the white color is that we have, there's a metric associated with it in this particular example. The box in the lower left-hand corner I will describe a little bit later. So let's look at the boxes at the top. We're talking about, first, getting voice of the customer. Hospitals have sales and marketing efforts. They also then have clinical services. They invoice and collect. Then they report their financials. You also have support groups. You've got IT, housekeeping, food service, patient transportation. So those are support groups that I'm considering in this assessment. But the boxes at the top represent somewhat the main flow of the functions of the hospital. So what I like to do now is have it so that what we're doing is we're clicking on this, and then I'm describing the financials. So if you look over here, over in this side here, what we can do is we can click on this box to describe the procedures for reporting financials. These other boxes that I'm showing here represents the satellite level metrics as a result for reporting the financials. To the right, this is what we would have as our procedure for reporting the financials. So remember I talked about having y as a function of x. So we had y equals a function of x. So this would represent somewhat the big Y for the organization as a whole. And we're going to have linkage now to this overall Y to all the procedures within the organization. Often what happens when we have scorecards and we have process improvement efforts, the people in the North Wing work on scorecards, and the people in the South Wing work on process improvement efforts, and they never talk to each other. So if you don't like Y, the output or a metric, then you need to work on process improvement efforts. Because again, just managing to the Y value is what we call management by hope. Oh, there you go. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to move back. Oh, I forgot one thing here. Gee. Okay, we want to look now, click on profit margins. So we want to see how we're performing. This is all a function of the internet connection speed on how fast things get pulled up here. So notice now we can actually have a red button here in the left-hand corner here. See, we got red, but this is not a red that's looking at each of these individual values here. It's not saying, oh, that might be red, that might be red. It's not doing that. What it's really putting is red because, as you can see over here, we we move down to a lower level, where in this case it's profitability, which is not good, obviously. So if we've got a recent region of stability, which we do here, in this area right here, so then what we can do is we can take that data, and we notice we got the 6 points, so those represent these points right here. Now in this particular case, we don't have a specification. So what I like to do is look at the median value and the 10, 50, and 10 and 90% values. So that represents 80% of the months are going to be between this value and that value. What I'm suggesting with the scorecard system, all levels of management would see this, and you can obviously have protection if sensitive information, but basically anybody that has access to all the data would be able to see this. And what I'm suggesting from the line operator, the CEO, they would see this information presented in this format. Now, rather than having them read it off the chart, what we like to have is this reporting of information like here. So now we see we got the median value, this one here, which is this value right over here. And then you notice we got this 8.66 represented by this value over here. And then this 11.22 represented as this value here. So the wording down at the bottom is rather easily understood. The estimated median is 9.9% profit margin, with 80% of the months between 8.66 to 11.22. So that represents the variability we have from common cause variability in this region that we're having here. Now, what you can do is you say, at this point, you could mail this to somebody, or what we really want to do is to go in and make an improvement here. We want to better understand what's happening. So what we're going to do is we're going to now go back to looking at the voice of the customer. Okay, so we're clicking on voice of the customer. Now these are the metrics we're having for this. So you're looking at complaints, the scores here, customer dissatisfaction. Okay, so if we click on customer dissatisfaction, and notice here we've got, again, our process over here that's related to this. So again, we're linking Y as a function of X. So now if we click on customer dissatisfaction, okay, so what we see is our dissatisfaction went up. Well, that's not good. Okay, so if we notice down here, we can add some comments. Because where's the information that the most useful is find out what customers are really saying. Well, they've had issues with the room cleanliness, unfriendly staff, spent a lot of time waiting. Okay, so that's given us a clue what's happening within our process. Because what we really want to do is try to understand what we might do to actually improve our financials. Okay, so we're up the value chain again. So let's look at sales and marketing. So if we look at sales and marketing, again, when this is sales and marketing, it's got our process over here, and we can have drill downs in the process to get into all the procedures and documents and that sort of thing. Now we look at market share. Oh boy, goodness. Look at our market share went down. So we used to be running at about 55%, somewhere along in there. Now we're down to 52%. Okay, so again, we're reporting out similar to what we did previously. Now in our comments here, we noticed that another hospital's opened up in town. Okay, well, the environment changed, so we've learned something there by looking at this metrics. Let's look at how we deliver clinical services. So these, again, are the oblong boxes represents how we're going to measure delivery clinical services. We look at our length of stay. Okay, for this particular case, we're looking at it on a period of time. This could be week or month. And we're looking at the average value that we have. We're trying to track the average length of stay over time. So you see that this is the mean value here. And we're also looking at the standard deviation that we have within each of these periods of time. Like for each month, what is the average value and the standard deviation? And you can see both of these are, this one's stable, and this is stable also. So then we can look at our probability plot of the actual raw data. We notice our process is predictable. The median value is 262, with 80% of the time between here and here. So it looks like it hasn't changed over time. So right now in this investigation, we're trying to understand what's affected our financials. So this has been pretty stable over that period of time. So this doesn't look like that's been a driver for our financials decrease. So the idea is we don't have to improve everything. We're trying to figure out where to focus our efforts. So let's look at our error rate and see if that's done any changes. Well, this is good news. You can see how our error rate here reduced down to here, so that's good news. So now we're running at about this amount per period. So that didn't really affect our financials either. Now, maybe we want to drive it either further, but for this purpose, this illustration, we're not going to be addressing that. Let's look at housekeeping now. So we're looking at a cleaning quality metric here. Oh my goodness, this is not good. It's indicating that we had this drop here. Yeah, notice here, this says acceptable now. Because right now we haven't really made the decision that we're actually going to work on this or not. So even though this green is right now, we might end up changing that to red later. But right now, we don't have any action plan to work on that. So that's an important point that needs to get highlighted here. But you notice here, the cleaning services were outsourced as part of a cost reduction program about in this time frame. Okay, another clue. That is a murder mystery. Who done it? And we're trying to put together some clues here. Let's look at patient transportation. Okay, the one I got data for is diagnosis to bed. Oh, looks like we made an improvement here, right? So this moved down. That's good news. That's the right direction. However, let's look at how we're performing, because remember now, we're going to be taking that data from the recent region of stability to put together this probability plot over here. Well, in this particular case, we had a spec. We wanted to have it less than 30 minutes. But what's happening, even though we made an improvement, we're still not doing very well, because we got a large percentage over here that's not meeting it. So it looks like over here, just about a 6% of the time we're meeting it. Okay? 6-7% of the time we're meeting it. So the way we really word our statement here, the process estimate is about 93% nonconformance. Okay, so that's not good. But again, we haven't yet to determine if we're going to be working that or not. Okay, so we've looked at all our data. Now let's look at this enterprise process management. This is a similar chart to what I described earlier in the PowerPoint presentation. And what we've really been working on initially is the value chain, which describes what you're doing. We talked about satellite, those are financials. And then we talked about also the 30,000 foot level metrics. So fundamentally, you start with your vision and mission. You describe what you do and how you measure what you do, which is basically what we've been doing. Then you want to analyze the overall situation. And that's kind of what we were doing through the value chain. Obviously, you would have more things that you might look at than just the value chain. Then we want to create smart satellite level metric goals. Those are financials. Well, how about if we go in and decide that we want to just move up our monthly profit margins to what they were previously before that hospital moved into town. Okay, so that could be our goals. And then what we want to do is we want to create strategies that are aligned to the financials that you can get your arms around. Then we want to look at high potential areas. And we want to also establish 30,000 foot level metric goals that are SMART. That's specific, measurable, actionable, relevant, and time-based. And then we want to identify and execute projects. So now when we put together these 30,000 foot level metric goals, those are aligned to the process owner. So we're looking at the big picture to figure out where we could focus our improvement efforts. Then we want to assess how the project is doing relative to our goals. We want to maintain the gain. Notice when we loop back over here, we're looping back to step number 3, not step number 1. So if we did a good job in our process improvement projects here, what we really did was we changed the procedures in our value chain, which affected the 30,000 foot level metrics, and then also the satellite level metrics. Now, if you notice here, this is somewhat of a loop to it. This is like Deming's Plan, Do, Check, Act, continuous improvement, but we're only applying it to the overall business system. Now, let's figure out where we should focus our improvement efforts. So let's look at our business goal. Well, we want to earn the monthly profit to where it was previously, and we're going to establish a certain time frame to doing that. So we decided we would like to go in and do that in 14 months. So that's what we want to do. We're not operating there. How are we going to do that? Well, we're going to do it is we want to increase our monthly revenue. So this is the top line, because we're going to have a lot of fixed costs that's got to be covered whether we have a few patients or many. And how we're going to do that, or we're going to focus our efforts on marketing, and we want to return our market share to this value we were before. So that becomes a goal. And then the marketing manager is going to be tracking that, or you're going to be tracking it in your value chain, so that he or she's going to be held accountable to actually move those numbers. And that he or she's going to be reporting that out to monthly to perhaps the organization head. So there's somewhat of a burning platform for them to actually get the job done. But notice now they're asking for the project to get done. Now, another thing that you're working on here is improving the customer view of the services, because customer dissatisfaction was not too good. And consistent with their feedback, it looked like we had some issues with housekeeping and also the patient transportation. So those could be two aspects that we're going to work on. So there's also a moaner for this particular metric, and they are to improve that level of quality for the housekeeping to the level we were before, and also try to reduce this amount of time from diagnosis to bed. So this kind of gives you just somewhat of a quick view of how you get a big picture perspective relative to this overall system here. So again, starting with the value chain, it can give us insight to what we can look at differently. To give you an example of how the applications of these metrics are, the 30,000-foot level, we had someone in Germany attend our Master Black Belt session, and she was a statistician and got so excited about the way we were presenting these metrics that she changed the presentation of the 30,000-foot level, or changed to the 30,000-foot level metrics throughout her organization, because she said, I knew my processes was not out of control. And she transitioned from the X bar and R charts to these individuals charts. We're also had a mining company down in South America. When they, the manager, general manager, was going through and conducting meetings using this farmer reporting, completely changed the dynamics of the meeting. Before it was looking at the issues that you have today or this week, and then right now, then it changes. Oh, gee whiz, maybe I'm the bottleneck in my organization, and I need to go in and improve the maintenance on these monster trucks that they have for transporting the ore out of the ground. So it can really make a big difference on how you do it. We had one major customer that they present out to their executive management their results. You know, and they report it out once a month, and it takes them like 3 weeks to put together a slide deck of 67 slides. Well, and you know, whenever the data gets presented, it's not going to present in the full picture completely, and it's also going to be dated. So transitioning to this type of reporting can be really beneficial. So, oops. Okay, so basically what we've done here is illustrated how we can go in issues with the current process improvement efforts, and we've also talked about how you could go in and create these predictive scorecards, and then also we talked about how you can integrate this overall scorecarding system, which we have the software to help you with, so that now we're actually creating projects that really positively impact the overall big picture. So hopefully you found this session beneficial, and I wonder if we got any questions.
So please type in your questions in the GoToWebinar system, and we will get those addressed. One of the questions that just came in Or how often are the charts updated?
Oh, that's a good question. This is not real-time analysis. But what you can do is you can set it so that you can update them whenever you want to. Now, what I'm suggesting is maybe like once a day that you would update these charts. So it might be at midnight that you update these charts, and then you can actually get the data from ERP systems, spreadsheets, or wherever, and then it's going to be pulling that information to create this chart. And what the software is going to be doing is actually creating pictures of these charts. And then because you don't want to have data in two different places, so then that's good for the next day, and then the following day would change.
Okay, and what type of data can the EPRS use?
Okay, what kind of data you can use? You can use pretty much all forms of data. You want to look at information in time series, and then you want to see if it's basically stable and predictable. So you can look at attribute data. You can look at you can also look at time between failure data. You can look at continuous data. You can add different forms of subgrouping to it. So it's pretty much basically any time of data that you might be experiencing on an ongoing basis.
Okay. Let's see. What can be done to get acceptance of this methodology by upper management?
Okay, it's a good question. Since this is a methodology that's really different than what most people are used to experiencing, I would suggest starting with a red, yellow, green scorecard if your organization uses that. What you could do is take a red, yellow, green scorecard, something that's toggling into red every once in a while, and present that using the 30,000-foot level method of reporting. And I would venture to say more often than not that most of the signals that you're getting are common cause variability. And then you might say, boss, or whoever you're doing this for, we've thought we made improvement, but in reality we got a 5% problem and nothing's changed over the last year, even though it's looked like it's gotten better and worse several times along that way. And then you say, well, how can we do it differently? Then that could be a lead into this overall system, a different way of thinking.
Okay, and the next question, does the application account for variable interaction of the various processes? For example, improving one process having a negative impact on another process.
Okay, that's a good point. What I would suggest is that you look at both of them together. It's not really going to address it typically. Let's step back and say you've got on-time delivery and defective rates. Okay, so I would rather not look at those in conjunction with each other, but I would suggest maybe I would want to go in and improve on-time delivery, but I want to make sure the defective rates don't get worse. So we're going to be making sure that we're not trying to achieve one objective with the detriment of another metric that we feel is satisfactory. So again, you're looking at one metrics and you're trying to make sure the other one didn't degrade.
Okay, and were you using Minitab for your statistical analysis today?
Yes. What happens with the software, you'll have on a server, you'll have basically three different things. You'll have Minitab statistical software. Then you've got a flow charting program that have like iGraphics or Visio. And then you would have our EPRS software. Okay, so what we're actually using is the flow charting software to actually create all the drill downs. And then we're going to be linking that with data that we're pulling from it and putting into Minitab to actually conduct the analysis. And then we're going to be taking those Minitab analyses and creating a picture and then putting them in the flow chart.
Okay, and that's all the questions that we've gotten so far. If you have any more, please go ahead and send them over. And if not, if there's any other questions you have or any specifics, you can see Forrest's contact information there on the screen. Again, there will be an exit survey when you leave the webinar. We do review your feedback and appreciate you taking the time to do that. And we can address anything else with you offline. And again, we thank you for taking the time to join us today.